My mother actually smirked when I walked into the conference room. It was a small thing, barely a twitch at the corner of her mouth, but I had spent 32 years reading that face like a weather report. She thought I was there to ask for something. She thought I had shown up with my manila envelope and my flat shoes and my tired eyes because I needed her to throw me a scrap. She leaned over to my Uncle Ray and whispered something, and he pressed his lips together to hold back a laugh. I didn't say a word. I sat down across from them, placed the envelope on the glass table, and folded my hands on top of it. The estate attorney, a woman named Sandra Briggs, looked at the envelope. Then she looked at me. Something shifted behind her eyes, something careful and deliberate. She straightened the papers in front of her, cleared her throat, and said she needed a moment before we began. My name is Emma Whitfield. I am 32 years old. I work in forensic accounting for an insurance firm in Columbus, Ohio, which means I spend my days looking for the places where numbers lie. I am very good at my job. I was not always good at anything. For most of my life, I was invisible. My grandfather, Harold Whitfield, called me M. He was the only one who did. He was a retired electrician who lived in a white clapboard house on 4 acres outside of Millhaven, Indiana. He kept a vegetable garden and a woodworking shop, and a hand-painted sign above the shop door that said, "Measure twice, cut once." He smelled of sawdust and coffee. His hands were enormous and rough, and when I was 7 years old and my mother moved out of our house without taking me with her, those hands were the ones that braided my hair badly and packed my lunch wrong and showed up every single morning anyway. My mother, Linda, left because she said she needed to find herself. She found herself in Clearwater, Florida, with a man named Dennis who sold vacation properties and wore linen shirts. She called on Christmas and birthdays. Sometimes she remembered the year right. My Uncle Ray, her brother, stayed in Millhaven. He stayed close to Grandpa Harold. He was always at the house, especially after Grandma passed, always helping, always present, always reminding anyone who would listen what a devoted son he was. The neighbors loved him for it. I was not a neighbor. I was the granddaughter who actually lived there, who slept in the blue bedroom down the hall and ate cereal at his kitchen table every morning before school, who learned to read a tape measure and wire a light switch and calculate load-bearing capacity because he believed that competence was the most generous gift one person could give another. When I graduated from college with an accounting degree, Grandpa Harold drove 6 hours by himself to watch me walk across the stage. He sat in the 3rd row in a pressed shirt and a bolo tie he had bought specifically for the occasion. Afterward, he took me to dinner at the nicest restaurant he could find in the city, and he ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, and he said, "Em, I am so proud of you I could burst a seam." He said, "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small." He said, "I put something away for you, for later, for when you need a foundation to build on." I thought he meant money in a savings account. I would find out later that he meant something much more specific. I moved to Columbus. I built my career. I called Grandpa Harold every Sunday morning, and he told me about the garden and the shop and the neighbors, and I told him about the cases I was working, and he listened with the focused attention of a man who genuinely cared about how accounts reconcile. And then he got sick. Congestive heart failure, the cardiologist said. Manageable at first, then less so, then significantly less so. He moved slowly and tired easily and had to give up the shop before he was ready. And that was when the weather changed. My mother flew in from Clearwater in March. She said she wanted to be there for her father. She said she had always regretted the distance. She arrived with 2 rolling suitcases and a fresh tan and a new habit of calling him Daddy in a soft voice she had never used when I was a child. She sat beside his recliner and read him magazine articles and fixed his meals and told the home health aide that she had it handled, that family takes care of family. Uncle Ray had always been around, but now he was around differently. He started asking Grandpa Harold about the property, casually, conversationally, the way you ask about the weather. "Just thinking about the future, Dad. Just want to make sure everything is set up right. You don't want the state getting involved. You know how probate can get complicated." I watched this from Columbus, from the Sunday calls that were now slightly shorter, slightly more guarded. I watched my grandfather's voice change over those months. He was still sharp, still himself, but there was something careful in him now. Something measuring. One Sunday in September, he called me on a Tuesday instead. That alone was enough to make my stomach drop. He said, I need you to come home this weekend. Don't tell your mother. Don't tell Ray. Just come. I drove the 3 hours on Friday night. I let myself in with my key. He was in the kitchen in his robe, sitting at the table under the overhead light, and in front of him was a yellow legal pad covered in his cramped handwriting. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said, I think you need to see something. He showed me the bank app on his tablet. He had set it up 6 months prior because the mail had been going missing. Ray picks it up, he said, to help. He says. He said the word help the way you say a word in quotation marks. I looked at the transactions. I didn't need long. The withdrawals had started in February. Small ones at first, 200, 300, positioned between the normal bills so they would blend. By July they were larger, 700, 1,000, twice a month. The payee Honoin listed each time was the same. HW Property Solutions. What is HW Property Solutions? I asked. Harold Whitfield Property Solutions, my grandfather said. He handed me a piece of paper. He had printed it from the Secretary of State website himself, filed in January. Registered agent, Raymond Whitfield. Business address, Uncle Ray's house on Birch Street. I sat down. Your uncle has been paying himself to maintain this property, my grandfather said, his voice completely level. The grass gets mowed, the gutters cleaned, normal upkeep. I paid him $30 a week for that. Cash. Same as I paid the neighbor's kid before him. He set up a company and started charging me $800 a month for it instead. Have you said anything to him? No. He pulled the legal pad closer. I have been writing everything down. Every withdrawal. Every date. Every time the amount changed. I have the statements. I have photographs I took of this property to document exactly what maintenance has and hasn't been done. The back fence has been broken for 8 months. He said he fixed it in April. He charged me $600 to fix it. It is still broken. I looked at my grandfather, at the legal pad full of numbers, at the evidence he had quietly assembled by himself, in this kitchen, under this light, while his daughter held his hand in the living room and called him Daddy. Does Linda know? I asked. I believe she does, he said. Not all of it, but enough. He reached across the table and put his hand on mine. His grip was still strong. I have an appointment Monday with Sandra Briggs, he said. She handled your grandmother's estate. Good woman. I trust her. I am going to update my will, and I am going to give her something to hold on to. Something that only comes out if it needs to come out. He paused. I want you to be there. Not in the meeting, just in town, in case something happens before it's finished. What something? He smiled, and it was the same smile he always had, quiet and certain. Just in case, Measure twice. I stayed the weekend. I went with him to Sandra Briggs's office on Monday. He went in alone. I sat in the waiting room for 90 minutes. When he came out, he looked lighter somehow, the way people look when they have finally put down something heavy. He passed away 6 weeks later. Peacefully, the hospital said. His heart just got tired. I stood at his graveside on a gray November afternoon and watched my mother cry into a handkerchief that matched her coat, and watched my Uncle Ray put his arm around her, and watched the neighbors form a line to hug them both. Nobody put their arm around me. I stood at the back with my hands in my coat pockets and thought about the legal pad full of numbers. I thought about what I was carrying in my coat pocket, a plain manila envelope, sealed, with my name written on the front in his handwriting. Sandra Briggs had handed it to me after the funeral with a brief, careful look, and said, Your grandfather left instructions about this. Bring it to the reading. I did not open it. He had told me not to. Sandra said not to. The seal was intact, stamped with her firm's notary emblem, and I understood enough about chain of custody to know that the moment I broke that seal outside of the proper setting, I handed the other side a weapon, so I carried it. For 3 weeks I carried it in the inner pocket of my work bag, next to my laptop. I felt it there every morning when I left for the office. I thought about it at night. I dreamed about my grandfather's handwriting on the front of it, the looping W in Whitfield, the way he always put a small horizontal line through his sevens. The reading was set for a Monday. December. The sky over Millhaven was the color of old pewter. I drove out Saturday and stayed at a motel off the highway because I did not want to stay in the house where my mother and uncle had been living for the past 3 weeks, settling in the way people settle into a space they have decided already belongs to them. Linda had redecorated the living room. She told me this on the phone with a brightness in her voice that she seemed to believe sounded like grief. I spent Sunday with Sandra Briggs. Her office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, and she worked on weekends when she needed to. She had the kind of energy that cut directly to the point without being unkind. She set a cup of coffee in front of me and opened a legal binder and said, "Let me tell you what you are walking into tomorrow." She told me about the will on file with the court, filed 8 years ago. It divided the estate between Linda and Ray in equal shares, with a modest bequest to a local veterans organization that Grandpa Harold had supported for 30 years. "And me?" I asked. She looked at me steadily. "You were not included in the original document." I absorbed that. You would think it would hurt more than it did. Maybe I had suspected. Maybe the ledger part of my brain had already run the calculation. "He wanted me to tell you," Sandra said carefully, "that this was intentional, not because of what you might think." She opened the binder to a specific page and slid it across the desk. It was a letter, his handwriting, dated the Monday of our visit, written the same afternoon he had come out of her office looking lighter. It started. "I left you out of the original will on purpose. I know that sounds like what they would say, but read the rest. I left you out because they are watching. Ray has been in my files. Linda checks my mail. If your name appears in the estate documents, they will spend the next however many months finding ways to discredit you. They will say you influenced me. They will say you manipulated a sick old man. They will hire someone to say, 'Your signature looks like mine.' I know how people like this work because I raised one of them, and I have spent 50 years watching the other one orbit money the way a moth orbits a porch light. So you are not in the will. You are in something better." I looked up at Sandra. She was watching me with an expression that I later realized was something close to admiration. She reached into the binder and produced another document. This one was different, thicker, attached with a binder clip to several pages of close-typed legal text. "A trust," she said. "A standalone revocable trust, executed separately from the will, funded independently. It does not go through probate. It is not subject to contest under the will's provisions. Your grandfather established it 14 months ago and has been quietly transferring assets into it ever since." She paused. "The house, the 4 acres, his investment accounts, everything of real value. The will that Linda and Ray were counting on," she said, "distributes the personal property, the furniture, the car, the checking account, which currently holds approximately $4,000. They get half of that each. The trust, which they do not know exists, transfers everything else to you as sole beneficiary. Upon his death, which has already occurred, the trust became irrevocable. There is nothing to contest because there is nothing to find." "And the envelope?" I asked. Sandra's expression shifted into something harder and more deliberate. "The envelope contains a detailed ledger of every unauthorized withdrawal made through HW Property Solutions. It also contains a sworn affidavit your grandfather recorded with a notary public 6 weeks before he died, describing in specific terms what he believed was happening with his accounts. It contains photographs, dated and time-stamped, documenting the state of the property versus what was billed, and it contains a printed record of a phone call he made to his bank, in which he reported the withdrawals as unauthorized and requested an investigation." She folded her hands. "That investigation is currently open," she said. "The bank flagged the HW Property Solutions account 2 weeks ago. They have been waiting for the estate to settle before moving forward because the funds flowed through the estate accounts. Tomorrow's reading will trigger a notification to the fraud department. When I enter the contents of the envelope into the probate record, it becomes evidence." I looked at the letter in my hands. At the last paragraph. I know you will want to say something. I know you will want to look them in the eye and tell them what they did. You can do that later if you still want to. But tomorrow, don't say anything. Let Sandra do her job. Let the documents do the talking. Numbers don't yell. They just are. You told me once you loved that about them. I always loved that about you. Don't let them see you coming, sweetheart. Be the number, not the noise." I folded the letter and held it for a moment. Okay, I said. Let's go to work. Monday morning, I arrived 2 minutes late. This was Sandra's idea. Let them settle in. Let them get comfortable. Let them look at the door twice, wondering if you are coming. When I walked into the conference room, they were already seated. Linda was in black, tastefully done, a cashmere sweater and pearls that I recognized from Grandpa Harold's jewelry box. Uncle Ray was beside her in a sport coat, his reading glasses on, a notepad open in front of him as though he planned to take inventory. He had brought his girlfriend, a woman named Patrice, who had no legal standing to be there but who sat in the back row like a witness to a coronation. They looked at me. Linda's mouth moved into that small, curved shape. "Emma," she said, her voice warm with performance. "We weren't sure you'd make it. The drive from Columbus?" "It's fine," I said. I sat down. I placed the manila envelope on the table. I folded my hands on top of it. Uncle Ray looked at the envelope. He looked at me. He looked back at the envelope with the specific expression of a man trying to figure out what he is looking at without appearing to care. His notepad stayed open. His pen didn't move. Sandra Briggs came in from her private office. She shook hands with Linda, then Ray, then me, in a way that gave nothing away. She sat at the head of the table and opened the binder in front of her. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to note for the record that this reading is being transcribed by the firm." She nodded toward a small recording device on the table. "All parties present have been notified of this per their signed intake forms." She looked around the table. "Are there any questions before I proceed?" Ray leaned forward. "What is in the envelope?" Sandra looked at him. "We will get to that." His jaw tightened. Sandra began reading. She read the standard preamble, the identification clauses, the revocation of prior instruments. She was methodical and unhurried, the way people are when they know exactly where they are going. Then she got to the distribution. Linda sat up straighter. Ray uncapped his pen. "To my daughter Linda Whitfield Crane," Sandra read, "and to my son Raymond Whitfield, I leave the following personal property to be divided equally. Household furniture and furnishings, one 2019 Ford pickup truck, and the balance of the checking account held at First Millhaven Bank." She paused. "Current balance as of this morning is $4,211. The silence that followed was a specific kind of silence. The kind that comes when a room full of people recalculate simultaneously. "That's it?" Linda's voice came out higher than she intended. "The checking account and the truck?" Sandra continued without responding. "The real property at 4404 County Road 12, including the house and 4 acres, along with all investment and brokerage accounts, are not subject to distribution under this will." Ray stood up. "What do you mean they're not subject to distribution?" "Those assets were placed in a separate trust instrument," Sandra said. She removed a document from the binder, executed 14 months ago, fully funded, with a named beneficiary. She laid the document on the table. "The trust operates independently of this estate." "I want to see that," Ray said. Sandra slid it toward him. He picked it up. He read the first page. He flipped to the second page. He got to the beneficiary designation. His face went the color of old concrete. He turned slowly and looked at me. Linda snatched the document from his hands. She scanned it. Her eyes stopped moving. She looked up. "He left it all to you," she said. "The word you had a shape to it like something thrown." "The house, the land, the accounts," I said. "Yes." "You weren't even in the will," Ray said. His voice was low and uneven. "He didn't know about you. You manipulated him. You got to him when he was sick and you—" "I'd like to enter something into the record," Sandra said. Her voice was quiet, but it landed with weight. She picked up the manila envelope. "Miss Whitfield, per your grandfather's instructions, will you confirm that this envelope has remained in your possession unsealed since it was given to you?" "I confirm that," I said. Sandra broke the seal herself, on the record, in front of all parties. She removed the contents. She did not read them aloud. She placed them in a separate evidence folder and cataloged each item verbally. 1 handwritten ledger, 11 pages. 1 sworn affidavit, notarized, dated November 4th. 43 photographs, date stamped. 1 printed bank inquiry record. Ray had gone very still. "These materials," Sandra said, document a series of financial transactions executed through an entity called HW Property Solutions, a limited liability company registered to Raymond Whitfield. She looked at him over her glasses. Your grandfather initiated a fraud report with First Millhaven Bank 6 weeks before his death. As of this reading, those materials will be forwarded to the bank's Fraud Investigation Division and to the Millhaven County Sheriff's Office, per his explicit written instructions. Linda turned to Ray. Her voice dropped to a hiss. You told me it was legitimate. You told me it was a management fee. Ray, she said sharply. She grabbed his arm. Ray, what did you actually do? He pulled his arm away. Linda, stop. How much? She said. Her voice was climbing. How much did you take? That is a matter under investigation, Sandra said. The ledger indicates approximately $41,000 over a 22-month period. She said it the way she might read a zip code. Completely level. $41,000, Linda repeated. She stood up. Her chair scraped back against the hardwood. She pointed at her brother. You told me we were protecting the estate. You told me the fees were standard property management rates. You told me, I need you both to lower your voices, Sandra said. You lied to me, Linda said. I left my life in Clearwater. I came back here. I gave up months with Dennis, and you were running some scheme the whole time? She turned to look at me, and for one moment her face was completely unguarded, raw with a kind of shock that I almost felt sorry for. Almost. I didn't do anything, I said. Grandpa did. The room went quiet again. A different kind of quiet this time. Ray sank back into his chair. His sport coat looked wrong on him suddenly, too formal, like something borrowed for an occasion that had turned into something else entirely. He looked at the evidence folder on Sandra's side of the table. He looked at his notepad, which was still blank. Patrice, in the back row, had stopped existing. She had made herself completely invisible and was staring at the window. I want to contest the trust, Ray said. His voice was very careful now. He was shifting modes, from cornered to calculating. He left it to her under undue influence. She was living with him. She had access to his finances. She could have set this up herself. Sandra let him finish. Then she said, the trust was executed 14 months ago, before Miss Whitfield had any access to estate documents. It was witnessed by 2 independent parties, neither of whom are related to this family, and notarized by my office. Furthermore, the trust contains an explicit no-contest provision. She opened to the relevant page and read, should any person bring a legal challenge to this trust instrument on any grounds, including but not limited to undue influence, incapacity, or fraud, that person shall forfeit any and all bequests made to them under any related estate document, and shall be named in the trust's referral letter to county law enforcement. She set the page down. In other words, Sandra said, if you contest the trust, you lose the truck, the furniture, and the $2,000, and you add a second referral to the sheriff's investigation. Ray's mouth closed. He's been planning this the whole time, Linda said. Her voice had the high, slightly unhinged quality of someone dismantling a belief they had held for years. He knew what Ray was doing. He set you up. He set us both up. He protected what was his, I said. Linda turned to look at me. Really look at me. I don't think she had done that in a long time. She looked older than I expected. She looked like someone standing in the rubble of a story she had been telling herself for 30 years about what kind of mother she was. Emma, she said. Her voice dropped. I know we haven't. I know I wasn't. I pulled a small folded piece of paper from the pocket of my blazer. I had put it there that morning, deliberately, the way you pack something specific for a specific moment. He left me a note, I said. He wrote it the day he came to see Sandra, the last line. I unfolded it. I read it quietly, to the room, without drama. If your mother asks you to forgive her, tell her this. Forgiveness is not a payment plan. I forgave her a long time ago, and it changed nothing. What you owe yourself is more important than what she wants from you. Take care of the house. Fix the back fence. Measure twice. Linda pressed her hand over her mouth. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. Sandra closed the binder. She looked at both sides of the table. The trust distribution will be finalized within 10 days, she said. The personal property can be arranged for pickup at a mutually agreed upon time. The The fraud referral will be filed this afternoon. She stood up. If either party has legal counsel they wish to consult before responding to the sheriff's inquiry, I would recommend doing so promptly. Ray stood. He straightened his sport coat with the automatic gesture of a man restoring dignity he no longer possessed. He walked toward the door without looking at me. Patrice followed him, her heels quick and small on the floor. Linda stayed. She sat there for a moment after the others left. I sat across from her. Sandra gave us the room. You should have called more, Linda said finally. It was not an apology. It was a statement offered sideways. He was happy to hear from me when I did, I said. She nodded. She looked at her hands. The pearls from his jewelry box caught the light. Those belong to the estate, I said, not unkindly. But clearly, she reached up and unclasped them without a word and set them on the table. She picked up her coat and her bag and she walked out. I sat alone in Sandra's conference room for a few minutes. Outside the window, Millhaven was gray and still, the way small Midwestern towns are in December, as though the whole place is holding its breath through the long wait for spring. My phone buzzed. A text from my supervisor at the Columbus firm, a woman named Helen who had hired me 5 years ago and had never once asked me to be anything other than precise and thorough. Heard you took personal days. Checking in. Take the time you need. Your desk will be there. I wrote back. I'll be in Friday. I have a case I want to pitch Helen. Financial fraud, elder abuse pattern. I think it's a template worth documenting. She responded in 30 seconds, already interested. I picked up the manila envelope, now empty of its contents. Just the shell of it. Just the outside that I had carried for 3 weeks in the inner pocket of my bag, next to my laptop, where I could feel its weight every morning. I thought about my grandfather sitting at his kitchen table under the kitchen light, writing numbers in a legal pad with his cramped handwriting. I thought about the measure twice, cut once sign above his shop door. I thought about the afternoon I was 12 years old and he put a tape measure in my hand and showed me how to calculate the square footage of a room, how knowing the size of a space means no one can lie to you about what fits inside it. He had measured everything. He had measured them for years. Sandra came back into the room and sat down across from me. He was a careful man, she said. Not a common trait. No, I agreed. She reached into the binder one last time and produced a small sealed card, plain white envelope, my name on the front. He said to give you this one after, she said, after everything, when it was done. I opened it. Inside was a note card with 2 lines. M. You are not what they owe. You are what I built. Go fix the fence. I drove out to the property that afternoon. The house was still empty in the particular way. Houses become empty after someone leaves for good, not the emptiness of vacancy, but the emptiness of a held breath that will never release. I walked through the rooms without turning on any lights. I touched the door frames. I stood in the kitchen under the overhead light where he had sat with his legal pad and his tablet and his quiet, deliberate certainty. In the shop, the tools were arranged exactly as he always kept them. Chisels in order of width, handsaws on the pegboard in the shape of a fan. On the workbench, a small laminated card taped to the wood, his handwriting again. You already know what you're doing. You just needed someone to tell you you were allowed. I went out to the backyard in the December cold. The back fence ran along the property line, a split-rail cedar fence, 8 panels, 2 of which had given way at the post, exactly as he had documented, exactly as Ray had charged $600 to repair and never touched. I went back to the shop. I found the post-hole digger on the wall where he kept it. I found the quick-set concrete on the shelf. I found his work gloves still hanging on the hook by the door. I came back out to the fence. The ground was hard but workable. I dug the first hole. I found the rhythm of it. The sky over Millhaven was going dark by the time I finished the second post. My shoulders ached and my hands were raw inside the gloves, and I was cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. I stood there at the back of his 4 acres in the early dark, next to 2 solid fence posts set in new concrete, and I thought about what it means to inherit something. Not the house, not the money, not the accounts, the thing underneath all of it. The knowledge that someone in this world looked at you and saw a person, not a ledger entry, saw something worth protecting, worth building for. I took my phone out and took a photograph of the fence. The new posts, solid and plumb, the split rail resting in the mortises where it belonged. I sent it to Sandra Briggs with the text, "Tell the fraud investigator I'll be available starting Friday for a full statement. I have everything documented." She wrote back, "He would be proud." I walked back across the yard toward the house, my boots marking the half-frozen ground. I could see the kitchen light I had left on. The window was a small, warm square against the dark. I had a lot of work to do. The fence still needed 2 more panels. The gutters along the north side needed cleaning, for real this time, not billed and forgotten. There was a drip in the guest bathroom that had been going for 8 months. I knew how to fix all of it. He had taught me. I went inside, took off my work gloves, and stood at his kitchen table. I opened my laptop. I found the folder on my hard drive where I had been keeping my own documentation, separate from the envelope, separate from Sandra's evidence file. My own ledger, the way he had kept his. Every transaction, every date, every photograph, every note I had written on Sunday afternoons after our phone calls. "Numbers don't yell," he had written. "They just are." I opened a new file and I started from the beginning. "Thank you for listening to my story. I know it was a long road, but he always said that the distance between where you start and where you end up is exactly as long as it needs to be, not an inch more. I would love to know where you're listening from today. Leave a comment below and tell me which part of the story stayed with you. If you believe that the people who love us quietly deserve to be remembered loudly, please subscribe to Mila Revenge Stories, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story.